The terrifying legend of Hillsdale. Once upon a time, there was a small town called Hillsdale, hidden in a valley surrounded by dense forests and rugged hills. Hillsdale was a quiet place where everyone knew each other, and life passed peacefully until the autumn harvest season began. The story begins with a young man named Jake, a local resident known for his curious nature and love for exploring the surroundings. One afternoon, while walking through the forest, Jake discovered an old abandoned cabin he had never seen before. The structure was covered in moss and vines, with broken windows and creaky doors. Intrigued, he decided to enter. The inside of the cabin was covered in dust and cobwebs, but something in particular caught his attention. An old leather-bound diary, abandoned on a table. Opening it, Jake found the notes of a man named William Turner, who had apparently lived in the cabin many years ago. The first pages of the diary talked about William's daily life. But as Jake continued reading, the entries became darker and more disturbing. William described how he had begun to experience horrible nightmares and terrifying visions after finding a strange amulet in the forest. The last pages of the diary were incoherent, filled with eerie drawings and warnings about a malevolent presence that was stalking him. Feeling a mix of fascination and fear, Jake decided to take the diary back to town to show it to his friends, Emily and Ryan. The three friends began to investigate William Turner and the amulet, discovering that William had mysteriously disappeared and that the amulet had a sinister legend. According to local lore, the amulet had belonged to a witch who had been executed centuries ago, and her cursed spirit resided within it. That night, Jake began to have nightmares similar to those described in the diary. He saw dark figures lurking and heard whispers warning him to stay away. He would wake up sweating and with his heart pounding, but instead of retreating, his curiosity drove him to continue the investigation. The friends decided to return to the cabin to search for more clues. While exploring, they found a hidden trapdoor in the floor that led to a basement. They descended the creaky stairs, and what they found below left them stunned. An altar covered with strange symbols, surrounded by black candles and scattered bones. In the center of the altar rested the amulet described in the diary. Ignoring his friend's warnings, Jake took the amulet. As he did, a blast of icy wind swept through the floor, and the amulet detached from the candles, plunging them into darkness. An invisible presence began to move around them, whispering and laughing. Terrified, the friends fled from the cabin and returned to town. From that moment on, strange things began happening in Hillsdale. Animals vanished without a trace, crops wilted inexplicably, and townspeople reported seeing shadowy figures roaming at night. Jake, Emily, and Ryan realized they had awakened something evil and needed to find a way to stop it. They consulted the town's elder, Mrs. Miller, who was known for her knowledge of the occult. She explained that the witch's spirit was bound to the amulet, and the only way to stop her was to perform an ancient ritual to seal her power. The ritual required several hard-to-obtain items, including rare herbs, the blood of a sacrificial animal under the full moon, and a specific chant that needed to be recited at the altar where they had found the amulet. Determined to save their town, the friends began gathering the necessary elements. Every step of the way was fraught with dangers and challenges. On one occasion, Ryan was attacked by an invisible creature that left him with deep scars. Emily nearly lost her life when a tree mysteriously fell near her. However, with Mrs. Miller's help and their unwavering determination, they managed to collect everything needed. The night of the ritual arrived, and the full moon shone brightly in the sky. Jake, Emily, and Ryan returned to the cabin, accompanied by Mrs. Miller. They placed the items on the altar and lit the black candles. Mrs. Miller began to recite the chant, and a dark energy filled the room. Shadows elongated and began to take shape, revealing the pale, furious face of the witch. Jake held the amulet tightly as the words of the chant echoed in the cabin. The witch screamed and writhed, trying to free herself, but the power of the ritual was too strong. Finally, with one last scream, the figure of the witch faded away, and the amulet shattered into 1,000 pieces. Silence fell over the cabin, and the friends knew they had succeeded. Returning to town, the malevolent effects began to fade. The crops revived, animals returned, and the sense of fear that had plagued Hillsdale dissipated. Jake, Emily, and Ryan were hailed as heroes, but they knew they would never forget the terrifying experiences they had endured. The cabin in the forest was destroyed, and the town returned to its usual tranquility. However, every autumn, when the leaves began to fall, Jake couldn't help but glance toward the forest and remember the dark presence that once haunted Hillsdale.